Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. First of all, I want to say thank you to the love that you guys have shown to me from my previous video. Heart. It really went beyond from my expected response from the expected views. I have to thank you guys for that. So thank you. Okay, anyways, back to the point of this video. Have you also been daydreaming life studying abroad, full of rich architectures, walls that must have been built over a century ago? Or you're into argyle sweaters, plaid skirts, trousers, coats, or you're into studying the arts, humanities, philosophy, architecture. Welcome to Dark Academia. Just a trigger warning, this video will mention subjects pertaining to mental illness and destructive behaviors, so feel free to just end the video if these subjects are a delicate topic for you. Welcome to A Guide to Dark Academia. We can divide the definition of dark academia into 3 categories. First, we will be talking about the fashion side. The fashion side brings about a preppy look that advocates wearing neutral colors, specifically in dark tones, with a color palette that usually includes gray, black, dark green, burgundy, navy blue, and brown. This aesthetic often utilizes a combination of argyle sweaters, turtlenecks, plaid skirts, trousers, blazers. You get the picture. It's the type of style that is perceived as timeless, and unlike other vintage clothes, it wouldn't be classified as outdated anytime soon, as the fashion is usually linked with the presumption of intelligence, which implies a specific lifestyle. Dark academia is not merely a subject of fashion aesthetic, but it also encourages a particular pastime or routine. As I mentioned before, it is affiliated with 1930s to 1940s university student fashion, and so both aspects correlate in the same way. We must think back to what college students were doing at the time, and take into account that it is based off a time period that modern technology did not exist. And so the hobbies that are being exhibited in this aesthetic are kind of traditional per se. You can see a lot of lists of activities on the internet that are being identified as those of dark academia way of living. But I'll use this one specific Tumblr post for a brief overview to fully assimilate what I meant by traditional. It includes going to museums, libraries, art galleries, learning a new language, writing letters, and lots of reading. It emphasizes the pursuit of knowledge, specifically in the liberal arts, where it pivots around the contents of classical literature, linguistics, architecture, and ancient art. Correspondingly, what one immerses themselves in plays a significant role to their ideologies. This is where we explore the third and last aspect of dark academia, and that is ideology. Since dark academia expresses admiration to melancholia, gothic, or tragic themes, it can be a pathway to more gruesome ideas and beliefs. Not to mention, it encourages fueling oneself with knowledge to the extent of self-destruction. It romanticizes the idea of excessive studying, pulling all-nighters, that ideally depicts a picture of a frustrated liberal arts student. An article titled "Everything You Need to Know About the Dark Academia Aesthetic" from the magazine Elle Officielle states, "The dark in the dark academia stands for members' slight penchant for the unusual and the illicit. Puzzles, murder, danger, cults, and secret clubs provide that certain darkness that distinguishes dark academia from the more romantic version, light academia. This is reflected in their fascination for decoratively designed guns or perfectly placed bloodstains on clothing." The term academia from the word itself describes an environment that is linked to education. While there are a variety of aesthetics that possesses the term academia, the two most popular are the dark academia and light academia, where the light academia is the opposite of dark academia. Although both have similar interests in terms of art, music, history, literature, etc., the main distinction between the two are their themes. Light academia focuses on light colors which promote brighter, warmer, and softer vibes. It centers around promoting positivity, motivation, gratitude, joy, and happy endings. To fully comprehend on what is considered light academia, timeless classic books like The Secret Garden, Jane Eyre, and Jane Austen books are among the top literary depictions of the aesthetic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when people were isolated in their homes, social gatherings were prohibited, no in-person classes, no social interaction. People were longing for an alternative reality outside of their homes. And so students turned to social media as an outlet for their sentiments, each to their own expression of feelings, both good and bad towards the situation. But the etymology of dark academia didn't start in 2020. Instead, it has long been resurfacing in various art forms. Films like Dead Poets Society, Dorian Gray, Kill Your Darling, and the famous Pinterest picture of three kids running in the museum from the movie called The Dreamers. If you are the type of person who is conflicted in taking in worldly, liberated, uncommon depiction of ideas, then I wouldn't suggest watching any of these films. Let's just say that the things that they have in common is, of course, they are set in an academic setting, often in prestigious universities. But the main cause for concern is it involves a mysterious and moody narratives with themes that are to be pondered on. Like the themes that they have usually involves like an analysis, like you really have to engage in deep and serious thoughts, especially in discussions about life.
The snow in the mountains was melting and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation.
So the start of the dark academia aesthetic can be traced back to Donna Tartt's The Secret History, where the book is acknowledged as an element that popularized the creation of this literary subgenre. I have yet to finish the book as I have become aware of my lousiness in reading books recently. But I promise you that once I get rid of this book slump phase, then I'll certainly get back into it. Hopefully sometime soon. Anyways, the book was published in 1992. This doesn't have spoilers, by the way, so you're good. That tells the story of 6 eccentric classic students at a prestigious university who, along with their professor, isolate themselves from the rest of the class in pursuance to engage in intellectual discussions. The Secret History is an inverted detective story narrated by one of the 6 students, Richard Papin, who reflects years later upon the situation that led to the murder of their friend Edmund, or Bunny, Corcoran, wherein the events leading up to the murder are revealed sequentially. If you are a big fan of Greek and classical literature, basically dark academia vibes, then I would suggest to give this book a go. And comment down below what you guys think about the book so I'll be more motivated to finish it. I personally have not heard of The Secret History until its rise to popularity on TikTok in 2020 under the hashtag Dark Academia. According to Natalie Black, Director of Strategy plus Insights at Hierarchy and the founder of Culture X Curate, it is the secret history that serves as a guide to transforming the entire aesthetic into an actual lifestyle. The trend is an interesting remix from a broad range of eras from the 18th century to the 1940s. But even before it was termed dark academia, this type of aesthetic existed back around 2015 in the course of Tumblr days and has since spread progressively across social media platforms. Before anything else, I would just like to say that I adore the vibes of the dark academia aesthetic. I am personally fond of most of its aspects, like pertaining to the fashion, architecture, literature, etc. And I love how it encourages the pursuit of knowledge, as most of us should, especially in the liberal arts, as it has been quite overlooked countless of times. With that being said, this is where we talked about the Eurocentric nature of dark academia and its lack of diversity. As discussed, dark academia focuses on themes that center around classical Greek, Roman arts and culture, which is foretold that it is basically an aesthetic that romanticizes the principles of a limited cluster group. The aesthetic has been criticized for its lack of inclusivity as it only caters to European customs. This can be seen from the books that are inspired from the aesthetic that portrays little to no representation of the minorities. Sarah Burton, a sociology fellow at University of London, has noted that the aesthetic contains little representation of most women, working class, people of color, fatness, people with low economic or cultural capital, disability, caring and domestic activities and labor, motherhood, queerness, and the mundanity of academic life. As a result, many artists and creators developed original contents that incorporate diversity in their literary works. Additionally, social media users impart their own take on the aesthetic by providing fashion tips and visual ideas, as well as sharing books and films from their respective cultures. But the issue with dark academia is that the widely known interpretation of the aesthetic, films like Dead Poet Society or The Secret History, more often than not, does not usually depict the actuality of the situation during the time. Because of its lack of diversity, it didn't include or illustrate the marginalized group. I just find it self-contradictory because themes like slavery, oppression, mistreatment, abuse, and etc. weren't considered or sought out to be portrayed in one of those works. And ironically, coming from an aesthetic that seeks the emphasis of the meaning of life. Which brings us to our next point, the elitism surrounding dark academia. Yes, humanities is a noble pursuit for sure, but in practicality, for someone who wants to immediately get a job with a high income, it does not commensurate to the amount that you needed to invest in your education. As we've come to realize that during this modern age, learning about humanistic doctrines and literary doctrines are seen as quite a luxury. People couldn't really afford to have that kind of pursuit, especially at a prestigious university, as the employment and demand for that kind of career is unfortunately inadequate in our society. Having this glamorized perception of learning at an expensive institution gives people make-believe expectations. This is not to say that you wouldn't be successful in pursuing this path, but one ultimately needs financial backing because not all of us have the wealth to study liberal arts and having a secured future all at the same time. And you know what? The demand for STEM and business majors, they weren't the sought out career paths before. Not until the rise of capitalism and women being allowed into the workforce that there's a change in the verdict of figuring out one's vocation or livelihood, which will be tackled at a later video if you guys are interested. Anyways, in accordance with education, one alarming concern for the dark academia aesthetic is the romanticization of mental illnesses, which I know it seems kind of far off for now, but we have briefly talked about the dark academia lifestyle, and that involves excessive amounts of studying and to the extent of self-destruction and burnout. It also has faced criticism for glorifying unhealthy behaviors and are being held as admirable, such as sleep deprivation, overworking, high consumption of caffeine and alcohol, and obsessive behaviors because of the passion for the pursuit of knowledge. As what Anuska stated in her article, dark academia idealizes the notion that you stay up engaging in obsessive depressive behaviors, consuming cup after cup of caffeine, and tearing through books like a fourth-year student trying to write citations to their thesis, simply because you can, because you enjoy reading and learning and knowing. Okay, we're back. Okay, to continue, while learning is held to high regard, too much pressure of it can be severely undermining. And learning should not be a burden, but rather an asset, something that fuels your curiosity that leads to intellectual satisfaction. But the dark academia lifestyle promotes destructive perceptions about learning that you may need to sacrifice one or two to attain that level of understanding and knowledge. But you can practice self-care and pursue knowledge at the same time. You don't need to put a fundamental life necessity at risk in pursuance of another. And something that most dark academia books and films fail to resolve or shed light on is the apparent exhibition of mental illnesses from their main characters. They not only disregard the evident signs of mental illness, but somehow they glamorize it. A Reddit user as well shared their insights about dark academia. I also think dark academia has an unhealthy romanticization and idealization of mental illness and alcoholism. This is not to say these things should be stigmatized or that drinking any amount is not okay, but if we are honest with ourselves, dark academia does more than just discuss these topics. It promotes it in subtle ways that I think can influence people to go down unhealthy paths. With the rise of aesthetics like Y2K, cottagecore, that girl aesthetic, dark academia is no stranger to popularity. It's no wonder why people would be so drawn to this aesthetic as it displays alluring and pleasing visuals with a combination of dark neutral colors. According to Glamour magazine, dark academia is traditionally a style that works for the colder months. While the color palette is not very expansive, the dark academia style is filled with texture and mixes the different textures to add interest and depth to a more neutral outfit. It is most prominent during the fall and winter times as dark academia outfits have a lot of layers and a classic display of timeless fashion. It is in general described as preppy and often associated with wealth, as we all know in our society that the way you look is a crucial factor on how people treat you. Terms like pretty privileges fit into this category, and looking rich is not far from it. According to the article by Aaron Ignacio about the psychology behind dressing well, states that the way you dress offers a clear visual representation of who you are. It can positively represent you as someone who is confident, sophisticated, and smart, or it can negatively represent you as someone careless, indifferent, or worse, a failure. He furthermore adds that at work, your image is everything. If you carry yourself with poise and confidence, wearing the right suit, it makes a drastic difference in both productivity and probability of promotion. People respect someone who looks put together much more than someone who dresses carelessly. Looking good is not something that should be seen as a vanity, but rather a strategy, because how you present yourself often links to how people perceive you. It's the same along the lines of how you feel good or better when you wear a specific outfit, or when you prepare for a job interview, you want to put an outfit that entails that you are neat or organized. As reported by Working Frocks, the psychology of dressing well evaluates how we feel on the inside about the clothes we are wearing. Clothing is about who we are and how we want to portray ourselves to the world. We know that clothing and perception are linked. We evaluate people each day on their appearance, and they in turn evaluate us. I'm not a firm believer that clothing truly represents who you are as a person. The psychology behind clothing is definitely superficial, but we tend to pass judgment on others based on the way they look, and they in turn pass judgment to us as well. And I think that's partly the reason why people want to look like an aesthetic, because of the linked perception to the person who's wearing it. Additionally, having an aesthetic brings you closer with people who share similar interests, and dark academia also has that power. As mentioned by a dark academia enthusiast, Declan Lyman, I think a good part of dark academia is aesthetics, but it's also a community. The more you get into the whole vibe, the more you feel connected to other people in the tags. The main point is a desire to learn. Dark academia definitely inspires you to learn more and motivates you to attain a level of productiveness. And having literature as the main theme of the aesthetic, it is a pathway to share insights and to connect amongst like-minded individuals. It encourages noble pursuits like higher education and reading that nowadays are unfortunately overlooked and undervalued. Likewise, dark academia lets us associate our fantasies by incorporating it to reality. Like, the picturesque of this aesthetic has history written all over it. And the rise of this aesthetic apparently indicates that people are getting tired of technology and just wanted to have some sort of channel to pave the way for escapism. These trends somehow suggest that romanticization and daydreaming are key vessels to go through unpleasant circumstances. Which is of course kind of sad, but we are not to judge other people's ways to cope. with the understanding that participating in an aesthetic that revolves around learning, especially dark academia, one should be aware of the underlying goods and bads associated with it. And that is all for our video today. Thank you so much for watching, and comment down below what you guys think of this video, and if you guys have any suggestions on which topics that I should cover next, feel free to comment down below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell button to be updated for upcoming videos. I hope you guys are enlightened with the subject, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye!